Hello, everyone. It's an honor to welcome you to the 2024 College Freedom Forum, hosted by the Human Rights Foundation in collaboration with the Walter H. Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center and the Center for Human Rights and International Justice here at the Freeman Spogli Institute. I'm very excited to bring the College Freedom Forum to Stanford because I graduated from this university in 2018. I majored in classics and anthropology and was fortunate enough to benefit from some of the programs here at FSI. Through FSI, I interned at the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization's headquarters in Paris, France. There, I was able to see firsthand how decisions on the global stage are made, and unfortunately, how authoritarian states are so often able to manipulate UN mechanisms to achieve their own political objectives. This was actually one of the experiences that compelled me to pursue a career in the nonprofit world, where I now work with some of the key figures advocating for democratic change around the world, some of whom you will hear from in just a few minutes. As you just saw, HRF focuses on promoting democracy and human rights in countries ruled by authoritarian regimes. According to our research, today 72% of the global population lives under authoritarianism. And of that 72%, nearly half reside in the Asia-Pacific region, which is why we're bringing conversations about this region to the stage. When you think about dictatorships in the Asia-Pacific region, I'm sure you immediately think about North Korea and the Kim family's 75-year totalitarian rule. Or you might think of China and the Chinese government's genocide against the Uyghur people and the oppression of civil liberties in Hong Kong. But lesser known in the struggle for democracy is Burma, a place where there's ongoing civil conflict that was ignited by a military coup back in 2021. Or Thailand, where nearly 200 youths were arrested for simply hosting a peaceful protest against the monarchy. Or even India, a place where Hindu nationalism and crackdowns on dissent pose a great challenge to a country which is about to undertake the biggest presidential elections in human history later this year. At HRF, we know that the struggle against authoritarianism is complex, but rewarding. It demands cooperation between human rights defenders, but also dissidents, journalists, industry leaders, tech entrepreneurs, and yes, even students. HRF founded the College Freedom Forum series back in 2013 with the intention of bringing critical conversations about authoritarianism to college campuses around the world. Today, you will hear from activists who are working in some of the most challenging contexts. We hope that their stories provide you with inspiration for your academic studies and opportunities for future growth. To tell you more about our program today, I'm pleased to introduce HRF's president, Celine Asaf-Bustani.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited and honored to be here with all of you and also to partner with some of the world's foremost experts on democracy, such as Francis Fukuyama and Larry Diamond. And also, of course, to be here with the incredible activists that you will hear from today. We're really happy to be bringing them to you here at Stanford. It is so important to hear their stories because they humanize the struggle of millions of people, not just in the Asia-Pacific region, but around the world, people who do not have a voice. And it's also important to hear their stories because they teach us how to challenge and how to fight back authoritarianism. It is a very critical time. We're seeing across the globe wars, internal conflicts, the rise of authoritarianism, and threats to democracy. So it's a very important time to be fully aware of these threats and to utilize all the resources and all the skills at our disposal to protect it and defend it. And that holds true whether we live in an established democracy like the United States or under an authoritarian regimes like many of the speakers who you'll hear from today. It is always inspiring to see university students stand up for what they believe in. And I think it's, students play a very big role in this fight for democracy. And as you may know, a lot of protest movement or even activist movement are youth-led. And it's really important for you to hear from these speakers, because most of them also started, they didn't even think that they would become activists. They were students themselves or young activists, or professionals. And then one day they were faced with impossible odds and they had to make a choice. Either stand up against tyranny or just give up. And it's because of the choice they made that they're able to create impact and change and advocate for so many people around the world. You'll hear the story of Johar Ilham. Her father was detained when she was 18 years old. And that's when she became an activist. And she's been advocating for his release and to end the oppression of the Uyghur people ever since. You'll hear the story of Uni Park, who escaped from North Korea at age 21 and then, created a channel and ways to share with the world what it's like to live in the world's most closed society. You'll also hear the inspiring story of Lobsang Sangay. I'm still, learning how to say your name right, but Lobsang Sangay, and who served as the president of Tibet's government in exile. And then last, but certainly not least, you'll hear from Mai Khoi, who's known as the Lady Gaga of Vietnam, and she'll tell you and show you with her powerful voice what is it like to use your talent and your skills to stand up for Vietnam's repressive government. So, we hope these speakers will inspire you and challenge you to learn more about human rights atrocity you might not be familiar with, but also to think critically about, the rights you have and the fragility of democracy and how you can support this, democratic movement around the world. There are so many ways, wherever you're from or whatever you do, there's so many ways to play a part. And if you are willing and have no ideas, please reach out to us. We have plenty of ideas, and we love, passionate people who are here who want to make a difference. So again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. And I hope, you also feel inspired by these stories, and it will, you also feel hopeful, as I do when I listen to them. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, a scholar who does not need much introduction, someone that we admire a lot at the Human Rights Foundation, and our faculty sponsor today, Francis Fukuyama.
So I'd like to welcome the College Freedom Forum to Stanford and to the Freeman Spogli Institute. That's the building that we're in right now. I really admire the work of the Human Rights Foundation. I was at the Oslo Freedom Forum last summer, and I was very inspired by many of the stories that I heard there. I think that just to kick off the discussion, it's probably a good idea to talk about the general global situation. So my colleague Larry Diamond is sitting right there. You'll hear from him, I think, more specifically on the question of Taiwan and China later this afternoon. But if you are a careful reader of Larry's writings, you'll know that he's been telling us for some years now that we're in the midst of a democratic recession. The aggregate number of democracies in the world has been falling, and the quality of democracies has been deteriorating now since about 2008, 2009. So that's 17, 18 years in a row, and there are different components of that deterioration. So some of it is the kind of obvious stuff, the rise of two big authoritarian great powers that have a lot of economic and military muscle behind them. That's Russia and China. Russia in particular did something that really hasn't happened since 1945, launched an aggression across an international border, attacked a peaceful neighbor, and is trying to take it over. And as you'll hear, something very similar could happen in the case of another democracy, Taiwan. So those, plus countries like Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, I think those are all familiar cases of authoritarianism. There's another kind of illiberal danger that's arising that is affecting even established democracies like the United States. So just to set the stage a little bit, when we use the term democracy, we actually mean a kind of compound system that is a liberal democracy, in fact, and there's really two different parts to it. There's a democratic part, which means elections and popular choice, popular accountability, but there's the liberal part that really has to do with institutions that prevent the state from exercising all of the power that it could. They do this through the rule of law, through constitutional checks and balances, and these two parts of a liberal democracy can be mutually supportive, but sometimes they can be at odds. And I think that the kind of problems we're seeing with the rise of populist nationalism in places like India, in the United States, in Hungary, in Turkey, and other places, is where the democratic part attacks the liberal part. That is to say, you have an elected leader who does have a democratic mandate, and that leader steps up and says, I embody your will, you the people elected me, and now these judges, these bureaucrats, these people in the media are standing in the way of my accomplishing what you wanted me to do. And for that reason, they begin to undermine the rule of law. They weaken those institutional checks on power. Now, that's actually eventually connects to the democratic part as well, because one of the things they use this unbounded power to do is to make sure they never lose another election by manipulating the rules and so forth. And right now what we're seeing is this curious alliance between countries that ideologically shouldn't have much to do with each other: Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. They're all ideologically quite different, but they see that there's something that they don't like about precisely those Western freedoms that are guaranteed by a strong rule of law, and they're collaborating very vigorously to try to weaken our commitment to those freedoms internally. And I would say the one thing that, so I grew up during the Cold War, so I'm familiar with the struggle against authoritarian government. What's really different this time around is the fact that a lot of the threat is this internal one, where external authoritarian powers are able to use divisions within existing liberal democracies to weaken them and to weaken their will to resist authoritarian government. Now, I'll just conclude by pointing out the following. You can get very discouraged looking at the course of global events day to day. I mean, I kind of dread opening the paper in the morning. Actually, I still read papers. I guess you could say, you could pick this up on TikTok or something else if you just follow things on social media. But it's very depressing, to see the deterioration charted day by day. But I would just leave you with the thought that political systems and social systems have to be judged over a long period of time. And there's something wrong with authoritarian government. It doesn't produce good results in the long run because it concentrates power in a very small group of people, and sometimes it concentrates that power in one person. And that is exactly right now the problem with both Russia and China. You may remember prior to the Ukraine invasion, these pictures of Vladimir Putin sitting at the end of a 30-foot table. On the opposite side was his defense minister or his foreign minister, because he was so afraid of COVID. And he basically is the only decision maker in that country, and it's only that kind of an authoritarian system that can produce a disaster like the invasion of Ukraine. Similarly, in fact, I have a colleague, she's an Chinese-American professor, teaches in this country, but she spent a fair amount of time in the last year in Shanghai just describing what it was like to live under zero COVID. And again, this is a policy that could only be done not just in an authoritarian country, but in an authoritarian country where there's only one decision maker whose word means anything. And it's for that reason that these countries, in the end, don't produce good outcomes. They can do it in the short run because they can make decisions quickly and they can implement them without the kind of debate and back and forth and interest groups and legislators arguing with one another that we see in a democratic society. But in the end, it's not a healthy system, and it's particularly not a healthy system for those individuals that actually, as human beings, want to have greater freedom to speak, to associate, to believe what they choose to do and not what the government wants. So welcome to Stanford. I hope we'll have a great series of talks. I know we'll have a great series of talks today, and I'm looking forward to listening. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Jauhar Ilham. I am Uyghur. For those of you who are not familiar with who the Uyghurs are a Turkic ethnic group. We speak the Uyghur language, which is a Turkic language that is not related to Mandarin Chinese nor Cantonese. We dress differently. As you can see my little traditional hat that I'm wearing right now. We look different from Han Chinese. We eat different kinds of food. We also, most importantly, majority of the Uyghur population are practicing Muslims. We are from the Uyghur region, which is located towards west of China. The Chinese government likes to call it the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. You may have not heard about the Uyghur people, but I am certain right here in this room, there are a number of products that have been touched by the hands of the Uyghur people who have been working in forced labor conditions for massive multinational corporations. Whether we're talking about the cameras in the back or the outfits, for example, the Stanford University shirt or a white vest over there or a blue jeans over there. Or the floorings might be also touched by the hands of the Uyghurs, or maybe the walls, or parts of the cars that are parked outside of this building or in a building just like this one. Researchers have linked Uyghur forced labor to the supply chains of over 17 industries, from beauty to mining to green energy to information and communications technology, automotive and food, and so many more. To be clear, I am not here to make you feel bad about the Shein or Zara shirt that you put on this morning, or the wig that you could be wearing that are actually most likely from the shaved heads of my Uyghur brothers and sisters who are locked up in a prison or a re-education camp, or the Volkswagen and Tesla car that you and your family have been driving to school and to work. What I'm here to say is that we can all work together. We can work together to push companies to change their behaviors and end their complicity in this crisis, in the human rights abuses of my people. For decades, the Chinese government has been implementing repressive policies in the Uyghur region, pointing at isolated instances of violence. The Chinese government labels all Uyghur people as religious extremists or terrorists in order to justify their human rights abuses towards my people in the Uyghur homeland. But really, the key reason for the oppression of Uyghurs lies in geopolitics. Maybe you did not know, but the Uyghur region is full of natural resources such as gold, uranium, natural gas, which marks up China's over 20% of its total energy reserves, and making the Uyghur region a natural powerhouse for China. And did you know that 84% of China's cotton output is from the Uyghur region, and that is 20% of the global cotton output. And 95% of the solar panels, we think of the ultimate savior for the environment, relies on one key material, solar-graded polysilicon. 35% of the world's polysilicon, solar-graded polysilicon, is sourced and produced from the Uyghur region. 10% of the aluminum, which is a key material for producing cars, is sourced from the Uyghur region. 10% of the PVC plastics that's used to make panels, the ceilings, the floors, is sourced from the Uyghur region. And so many more industries. The region is also critical to the success of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is China's flagship trade project, trade and infrastructure project, aims to connect over 100 countries via railroads, gas pipelines, shipping lanes, and other infrastructure projects. The Chinese government frames the forced assimilation of Uyghurs as a stabilization of ethnic unrest and development in service of the Belt and Road Initiative. But the result is oppression and locking up millions. According to many well-known researchers, there have been estimated of 1.8 million Uyghurs and other Turkic majority peoples have been subjected to re-education, detention, and forced labor. The Chinese government also transports Uyghur and other Turkic majority peoples to other parts of China, outside of the Uyghur region. They're subjected to work in forced labor in factories across cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Shandong, Guangzhou. Forcibly transfer workers, Uyghur workers and Kazakh workers do not have the right to refuse work placements, do not have the right to choose what profession they want to work in, and they have their IDs withheld. They cannot go home freely or quit anytime they want due to risk of punishment, not only to themselves, but also the risk of punishment for their families after work. Those workers have to be attending mandatory ideological trainings, which oftentimes includes Mandarin language training. Doesn't matter if the worker is 86 years old who have never spoken Chinese words before, or if they're a 15-year-old. They have to memorize those Chinese words and Chinese phrases. They have to memorize Chinese songs that praises the Chinese Communist Party. The systematic and state-sponsored forced labor intersects with other types of egregious human rights abuses, which includes the destruction of centuries-old cultural landmarks, undermining Uyghur culture and customs, preventing Uyghurs from practicing their religion, gender-based sexual harassments, mass detention, mass surveillance, and forced sterilization. The birth rate of the Uyghur region dropped about 25% in one single year back in 2019. All in the aims of erasing the Uyghur ethnic identity and eliminating us from our own roots. The Chinese government's police state involves huge surveillance operations with numerous police checkpoints across the whole region. Every few blocks, you will see checkpoints like this. You will see police sitting at a desk, collecting people's phones, monitoring people's flows. What are they doing? Implementing surveillance applications into people's phones. My cousin, Nuralia Yalqun, she was stopped at one of those checkpoints. She refused to turn in her cell phone. For non-compliance and for having a photo of my father in her cell phone, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. I'd like to share a little bit about my father. My father, Ilham Tohti, he was an economics professor at Beijing University Minzu University in Beijing. Though he was an economist by training, he was best known for his public advocacy work for Uyghur rights and for promoting peaceful coexistence between the Han Chinese and the Uyghur people. For decades, he shared his academic findings, his research, he wrote articles, he talked to journalists. But he frequently angered the Chinese government, and he was sentenced to life for separatism-related charges. My father had never campaigned for separatism, nor called for violence, or supported extremism. But while in prison, he was shackled, beaten, denied food, tortured. Every time when he was denied food, each time lasted 10 days. And within the first few months, he lost over 40 pounds in prison. Today, I do not know where he is. I don't know if he has been transferred to another prison or transferred to a re-education camp or to transferred to a factory to work day and night. I don't know. In fact, I don't even know if my father is alive. no family visits have been allowed since 2017. For Uyghurs, not knowing the whereabouts of our family members, not being able to simply call them, not being able to go home freely, not being able to practice our religion, our culture, having our rights taken away from us, it all had become a norm. The people in this picture are medical doctors, soccer players, singers, comedians, and intellectuals, including my father on the top left corner, in the left corner. None of these people need any so-called job training or re-education, yet all of them have either ended up in a re-education camp or a prison, including my father. How did that happen? How? Here's a population data collection form, which is widely circulated in the Uyghur region by local authorities. The authorities is able to collect information such as how many times a person prays, whether this person is even a passport holder, what countries they have visited, also, most importantly, their ethnic identity. Any of these data points can be used by the local authorities to decide whether this person deserves to go to a re-education and whether this person deserves to be in prison. The organization that I work for, the Worker Rights Consortium, is a part of a global coalition. The Coalition to End Forced Labor in the Uyghur region, which is a very diverse group, from trade unions to student groups to investor groups to faith-based groups to Uyghur groups. We are calling on companies to end their complicity in the Uyghur crisis. At this point, no corporations in any sector, whether we're talking about cotton or tech or food or beauty, should be sourcing anything from the Uyghur region, where state-sponsored forced labor is rampant. And in fact, if a company would like to sell things in the US, no touch points from the Uyghur region is allowed because of the passage of Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act that was passed in the US in 2021. However, many more countries need to pass similar laws in order to make sure that their countries do not become a dumping ground for forced labor tainted goods, whether we're talking about Canada or Mexico or Europe or Japan or Korea. I hope to see one day that Uyghur sons and daughters like me can go home freely without fearing of retaliation or imprisonment, can call their families freely without having to be afraid of whether that will put your family members in prison, can practice our religion freely, can speak our language freely. And I hope that day comes soon, and you can help make that happen. At least you can help make that happen sooner. The truth is, no matter our differences, everyone in this room, we all share two things in common. No matter if we're rich or poor, no matter what our skin color is, what our ethnic background is, our religious background is, we're all human beings and we're all consumers. And that means we can have a voice and we can push companies and governments to make changes. Though in the US now we have a federal law banning the imports of Uyghur forced labor made goods, but still, many people have never heard of the Uyghurs, nor even thought about how this region is woven into hundreds of thousands of internationally known household brands. Therefore, education and awareness raising is key. We all together need to call on businesses to change their behaviors. We need to hold them accountable and asking them to be more responsible with their practices. We need to call on governments around the world to pass legislations that actually work. And together, we may actually have what it takes to free my family and my friends and my people from now what feels like this endless life of captivity. Thank you.
Have you ever a life where in public you could be physically assaulted by the police for wearing the shorts you desire? Think of a scenario where your cherished family members and relatives could be subjected to life imprisonment or public executions merely because you made a comment about your president, likening him as fat as a pig. How would you feel about inhabiting such a world? I lived in a dictatorship beyond what you can imagine, the world I just described. When I was 21, I risked my life to find fundamental human rights, the freedom of expression and freedom of choice. Through that challenging journey, I attained that kind of freedom many individuals born in democratic countries often enjoy without having to fight for it. So freedom means the world to me. With this in mind, I would like to commence my speech today by posing this question: what does freedom mean to you? At the age of 5, my parents divorced, which was uncommon in North Korea. My mother passed away, spending a decade in a mental hospital, while my father started a new family. I was raised primarily by my grandparents, who taught me to think for myself. They instilled in me a problem-solving mindset. This gave me the ability to challenge totalitarian principles under which I was raised. You see, the Kim regime attempted to control its citizens by surrounding them with propaganda and preventing them from accessing any outside of information. They suppress foreign influences by targeting young people who wear clothing or adopt hairstyles from Western countries. Police patrol the streets with the groups stationed every 200 meters to inspect people's clothing and hairstyles. I remember one instance where I wore tight buka pants. The police approached, grabbed me, and began cutting my hair and my pants in the middle of the street. Simply dressing differently was seen as an act of resistance. I spent days in the police office, penning apologies for my attire. One day, I approached my grandparents with a question: why can I not control over my own body? Why can I not express myself freely? My grandparents replied immediately, saying there was no hope in North Korea. They encouraged me to go to China and live as a free individual. This is easier said than done. Escaping North Korea poses an enormous risk. Many individuals who are trying to leave North Korea are intercepted by Chinese authorities and repatriated to North Korea. Those who return are sentenced to prisons or concentration camps where they could be subjected sexual violence and forced labor and torture, among other human rights abuses. Despite the risks, at age 21, I risked my life from escaping North Korea, reaching South Korea after a 50-day of journey across China, Laos, Thailand. I'm one of 35,000 North Koreans who have escaped to South Korea since the mid-1990s famine. Yet, even those who are lucky to escape like me still face the burden of not knowing what has happened to their families back home. Many North Korean defectors use a broker to stay in touch with their families and send money in a complex, expensive, and risky process. 3 years after my escape, I found a broker who could help me to contact my grandmother. This involved a smuggled mobile phone from near the mountains to make a call from the mountains, from near the China border. I spent $2,000 to make one phone call. The pain of hearing of my grandparents and being unable to embrace her again was indescribable. Unfortunately, this agony is not unique to me. It's shared by many North Korean defectors whose families are back home. Many of those born in democratic society take it for granted to call and see their family members whenever they wish. However, for North Korean defectors, contacting family even once a year is impractical, and seeing them is impossible. This is the sacrifice I made to live in a society, and because of this, I would never take freedom for granted. One of the biggest takeaways from my escaping is that freedom demands continuous effort. Even in a democratic society like South Korea, where I live now, freedom isn't free. I will give you an example. In 2016, I became a regular panelist on the TV show On My Way to Meet You, featuring North Korean defectors sharing their stories. I was just so excited to share about life in North Korea. However, over time, I discovered that panelists were not truly free to express their opinions. The directors would tailor the contents according to the political party in power, and they would offer more money to the panelists who told more dramatic stories. Leaving the show wasn't an easy choice. Payment of a day of recording could cover 2 months of rent. But I had to weigh all my values against the financial gains. However, when I reflected on the risk that I took to leave North Korea, I realized that I didn't want a job that I didn't have full-time freedom of speech. I ended up quitting the TV show and starting my YouTube channel to present North Korean human rights issues more accurately. In North Korea, I never got to make my own choices about my job and my clothing and the kind of TV shows I could watch. Now that I have a freedom to make my own choices, so I am very intentional about weighing all my options and considering the broader implications of my choices. As a person who lived under dictatorship, I can strongly say that freedom to choose is the greatest asset for humans. But this freedom is never guaranteed. Today's fast pace of social media and internet information encourage people to make quick decisions and find easy solutions. However, it is crucial not to make hasty decisions or jump to conclusions. Look at North Korea, which boasts free education and free medical treatment. Are people really living happier? No. I encourage you to make decisions after thorough analysis and consider how your actions will affect others and live a life according to your own values. It sounds simple, but it's a luxury many people around the world do not have. When I was your age, I risked my life to find a freedom. How will you make the most of your freedom? Thank you.
Well, my colleague Frank Fukuyama has already welcomed you, but I will also do the same. I want to thank Celine Asaf Bustani and the Human Rights Foundation for honoring Stanford University and the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies by allowing us to host the College Freedom Forum. I very much want to thank and honor our two previous speakers. Jur Ilham, we remember your father, Ilham Todi. We pray for him. We've not forgotten him. He's a human rights hero, and the world needs to do everything possible to demand his release from the neo-totalitarian regime, which is the People's Republic of China, and I'll come back to that. Everything we're talking about here, if you look at the map, the Xinjiang Autonomous Region, North Korea, Tibet, which I will come to in having the honor of preceding the great individual we're about to hear from, who led the government in exile in Tibet for a decade, and Vietnam as well. It all circles around the People's Republic of China. Let me begin by saying it's very important for us to understand what the People's Republic of China is and is not. We had hoped when we admitted China to the WTO a little over 20 years ago that it would embark upon a path of, in a way, liberalization, and that by being integrated into the world trading system, the same world trading system that you have heard Jur Ilham describe China's abuses of, that it would become what the former Deputy Secretary of State Robert Zellick called a responsible stakeholder in world affairs, and that gradually it would become less repressive, more pluralistic, more open, and so on. China has not evolved in that direction. Under Xi Jinping, it has become a neo-totalitarian state. It's become more repressive, more controlling. And if you want to see the future that the Chinese Communist Party state has in mind for the country, it's worth paying close attention to what's going on in the Uyghur region, because that is where they have been rolling out the social credit system of trying to aggregate all of people's data and information into a single integrated system that would understand every social media post that they are posting, every expenditure they have, in a monetary system that has now gone cashless and relies on a central bank digital currency, that every transaction of which can be monitored, every social interaction, every movement with the Orwellian presence of surveillance cameras. And this is, this is the future of China if we don't stand up and pressure for change. Moreover, if you watch what China is doing now throughout the region, not just in its pressure on Taiwan, one of the most liberal democracies in Asia, but its effort to command and appropriate all of the resources and maritime trade units, trade passageways in the South China Sea, you see the increasing danger of aggression and of China's effort to dominate and be a hegemonic power through the entire Indo-Pacific region. This is why the Philippines now, under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., is building up its navy and coastal defenses and turning to the United States after a period when the Philippines turned away from the United States, and to Korea and Japan and other countries for mutual defense against the rising authoritarian threat. And no country, no people faces a greater danger than Taiwan. The Chinese Communist leadership under Xi Jinping has made it clear that they think Taiwan is not only a part of China, but is a part of the People's Republic of China, the neo-totalitarian state that is ruled by the Chinese Communist Party, and that if reunification, in their terms, cannot be achieved by peaceful means, then it should be compelled by force. Today, the People's Republic of China is increasing its military expenditures and the expansion of its military forces, particularly the People's Liberation Army Navy, at a faster rate than any country in the world. It's the second largest spender in the world on military. It's expanding its nuclear forces, and it's increasingly intimidating a peaceful island, the Republic of China, Taiwan, that simply wants to be left to enjoy its democracy and its freedom, at least until such time as maybe democracy would descend on the Chinese mainland and the controversy across the strait could be resolved by peaceful means. I want to say a couple things more about the region. I have had the rather odd and unlikely privilege of visiting Tibet and seeing what the Communist Chinese Party state has done to one of the most formidably beautiful and precious environmental and cultural sites in the world. I have never had, in all my travels to more than 70 countries, a more shocking and depressing experience than seeing, first of all, the palpable fear. Of course, I haven't been to the Uyghur region, or I probably would have seen it there. The pervasive fear that the Chinese Communist Party state has implanted in Tibet by banning any display or sign of devotion to Tibetan Buddhist religion, to the Dalai Lama, or to the principles of the increasingly democratic principles of the Tibetan government in exile. This is, at a minimum, cultural genocide. It's a very deliberate effort to eliminate the culture of a beautiful and very distinctive people. And it has also involved massive, shocking, horrifying physical desecration of the structures of Tibetan Buddhism and of this beautiful landscape that's been paved over by Stalinist architecture and that is being resettled by Han Chinese immigrants in a deliberate effort to erase the independent identity and cultural heritage of the Tibetan people. I might add, with respect to Vietnam, because I know we're going to have a wonderful performance soon, that we'd hope Vietnam as well would move in a more democratic direction. It isn't as wealthy as China. It isn't as far along in modernization. But there again, you have a Communist Party leadership that is desperately afraid that its people, particularly its young people, once they get more access to information, more awareness of the outside world, will want what people everywhere want: freedom and human dignity. And so in Vietnam as well, freedom is moving in the other direction, in the wrong direction, in the direction of closure, suppression, and paranoia by a regime that is threatened by nothing more profoundly than the free flows of information. And so I'll conclude by a personal reflection on what you just heard from our very brave speaker, Eun-hye Park. And let me say I've had the privilege over 3 decades of interviewing some of your fellow escapees. I don't think that there is any more repressed country in the world than North Korea. I refer to it as one giant concentration camp and a repressive criminal gang masquerading as a state. This state is an enormous danger to world peace, not only because of its accumulation of nuclear weapons and its nuclear threats, but I think you now know of the unholy alliance that's been reached between Russia and North Korea that is trying to bail out Vladimir Putin's a war of aggression in Ukraine by providing Russia with some of the artillery shells and other military supplies it needs to sustain this campaign. And of course, you can imagine what's flowing technologically and otherwise in the other direction to help sustain the North Korean regime. During the administration of George W. Bush, the words regime change were given a very negative and aggressive color. And I understand it. I was in Iraq. I think it was a very ill-considered military intervention. But regime change is what is needed to secure human rights and human dignity in all of the places I've talked about. And we're not talking about regime change by military force or military subversion or any of the other means that they would like to use against free societies, including Ukraine and Taiwan. There's nothing that would be more subversive of these neo-totalitarian regimes and more facilitating of their transformation to human rights respecting societies than the promotion of free flows of information and ideas. You saw one in those thumb drives. I can tell you without being able to talk about it in detail, there are some other extremely exciting, technologically sophisticated innovations that are going on now to break the great firewalls that surround these countries and free these people's minds, because once they do that, they will free their systems. And it's my great honor now to turn it over to Lobsang Sangay.
Good afternoon. I think I'm the last speaker. Then suddenly I realized that I'm the only one wearing tie. But then I looked and realized there's the color of the College Freedom Forum and my tie matches, you know. So both even the Fukuyama and Larry Diamond, they are here to support dissidents and activists. They also roll their sleeves. And I happen to be wearing tie and suit. But as introduced, I have a title called former president of Tibetan government exile. I have credentials of Harvard graduate, lecturer there, senior fellow. But I stand here for freedom. The freedom is much used word. But someone told me freedom is like an oxygen. Those who have it, they take it for granted. They don't understand the significance of it. Those who don't have it, it's suffocating. And I stand here for freedom. That means I live a life of suffocation. For example, Larry Diamond just said he has visited Tibet. He's an American. But whenever I hear that, I get suffocating. I get suffocated because I'm not allowed to visit my hometown. I'm banned from visiting Tibet. It's suffocating. So that's when you fight for freedom. It's priceless. It's sacred. It's a treasure. As Elle and Celine said, 72% of the population in the world don't have freedom. It's a sacred, precious commodity. Only 28% of the people in the world enjoy freedom. So it's worth fighting for. It's worth standing for. That's why we travel. That's why we come and speak all the time. It's a tiring journey. You miss flights. Hotel rooms are so boring. But you speak for 10 minutes because freedom is precious. If you close your eyes and listen to my Uyghur colleague and North Korean colleague and replace Tibet with North Korea with Tibet and Uyghur with Tibetans, exactly the same story of suffocation, lack of freedom. So I'm here to present to you about a case of Tibet. So I'll go through, some slides and give you an example of what's happening in Tibet now. This Dege Dam project and protest is happening now. And Tibet as the third pole. Why Tibet is so important? We all talked about political rights, but I'll give you an example of environmental rights. And then Tibet is very rich in natural resources. That's why it's colonized. Why China came to Tibet, or Uyghur region, or Mongolia, or Manchuria, not because they want to help us, but they want to help themselves by exploiting natural resources. And then Tibetans in Tibet are committing self-immolation, burning themselves. Why? They're saying, I have a life, but it's so suffocating. It's not worth living. I would rather put gas over myself and burn myself and die. I would rather die than live because we don't have freedom, because it's suffocating. And not just Tibet, also the Uyghur region, Mongolia, all are colonized because of natural resources. That's the point I want to make. Now, this is a short video. You can see a monk begging on his knees to these Chinese officials. All women and men, all are following these Chinese officials and begging them, saying, please don't submerge our villages. Don't drown our monasteries. We've been living here for hundreds and thousands of years. But Chinese officials saying, no, we want to build a dam. And all your villages will be drowned. All your monasteries will be submerged. And precious murals, which is 700 years old, this will be wiped out from this world. These two villages and monasteries will disappear forever. Why? Because the Chinese government, Communist Party of China, or the Chinese companies, they want to build dams to generate power. Do Tibetans need electricity? No. But they said, no, we will build much bigger dam than the Three Gorges Dam of Yangtze River, because they want power. They're building, Chinese government has already built 400 small, mid-level, and large dams in Tibet. Why? They want to generate power. The question is, do we Tibetans need electricity now? No, we have surplus of power. Why are they building these dams? To supply power from Tibet to China, to Chinese factories, so that they can produce goods, they can produce cars, they can produce clothes. That's the reason. And who own these, dams? Mainly Chinese leaders' family members. Now, they are not just building dams, but they are also, look at the map of Tibet. Tibet is called the third pole. Antarctica and Arctic is much talked about. But I'll make an argument that Tibet is more important than Antarctica and Arctic, because when the glaciers and the snow of Antarctica and Arctic melt, it goes to ocean, it becomes salt water. But when the glaciers and snow of Tibet melt, it forms streams, it forms rivers, it becomes fresh water, and it provides water for 1.4 billion people in that part of the world. That's why, look at this, Yellow River and Yangtze River. This is the cradle of Chinese civilization. 90% of Han Chinese live in this area. Tibet, Uyghur region, Mongolia, and Manchuria were all occupied. The traditional or actual China is 40% of present territory. 60% were occupied by expansionist empire of China. It's important to remember. And look at this Yellow River and Yangtze River, both originate in Tibet. Mekong River, Salween River, Irrawaddy River, lifeline for Southeast Asian countries, all originate in Tibet. Brahmaputra, lifeline for Bangladesh and northeast of India, again originate in Tibet. Indus River and Satluj River, all originate in Tibet. So 6 of the 10 largest rivers of Asia originate in Tibet. That's why water is called white gold, Because even the UN Secretary Generals, Kofi Annan, Ban Ki-moon, and Boutros Ghali all have said there will be wars over water. Now, you might know by 2050, we will have 10 billion people, of which 5.34 billion will be in Asia, and of which 60% will live in urban areas. They all need water. And what is the source of water? Tibet. And Chinese government has conveniently not signed UN Convention of Water Sharing. And they are building 400 dams so that they can supply power from Tibet to Chinese region. Now, they are not only building dams and generating power, but they are sending 1 million, more than 1 million bottles of Tibetan water to Maldives and taking the credit. Now, they're not just content with damming rivers and sending water to other countries to generate goodwill, but they are also polluting Tibetan rivers to produce lithium. And Tibetan fish, you can see they are dying. Tibetans are protesting. Look at the armed force present. And we all know lithium. We all have iPhone, iPad, cars. Batteries are made out of lithium. Remember this. I'll conclude with that. Now you can see not just lithium, copper, not just lithium, copper, gold, lead, nickel, 136 different kinds of minerals are exploited in Tibet. Billions, hundreds and thousands of billions of dollars worth of minerals are exploited in Tibet. For what? For Chinese companies, so that Chinese leaders can profit from Tibetan natural resources. And then I keep saying China, but many of the companies who are involved in exploiting these natural resources are Canadian mining company, American and Australian and European, so all are guilty by association. So why China is in Tibet? They want to help themselves, not us. Now, Tibetans in Tibet are protesting. Peaceful protests, they get arrested, they go to prison, they get tortured. Now, people are saying, now, if you protest, you suffer in prison for a prolonged period of time, and you get tortured, and your family suffer also. So rather, it's better to put gasoline over your body, burn yourself so you die quickly, so that you don't suffer for a long time, and your family won't suffer. Self-immolation is being committed in Tibet because, as I said, freedom means oxygen. When you're suffocated, you say, I would rather die than live and sacrifice myself to send a message to the world. We don't have freedom. Please support us. Now look at this number. 85 people in 2012, 26 people in 2013, 157 Tibetans who committed self-immolation, male, female, monks, nuns, including some for the protection of environment, for preservation of their natural resources, for sacred mountains, for rivers. And they all have died. And then most of this self-immolation happened during my time when I was the president of Tibetan government. It was very painful, very sad. That's why I said it's very suffocating. People are dying, and you can't do much about it except share their stories and share their aspirations. So that's why my title is, Defiance of Tibetans, because Tibet is colonized. And I think we have my Uyghur colleague also mentioned this. We can clearly see Tibet, Uyghur region, and Mongolia all are colonies of China because 80% of cotton of China comes from Uyghur region. 90% of rare earth of China comes from Mongolia. Now, rare earth is really rare. It's an essential component, element for any gadgets you have. Planes, missiles, rockets. You have electric vehicle, iPhone, iPad. Rare earth is essential component, and China is monopolizing it because Inner Mongolia has a lot of it. and then lithium in Tibet, and all of the mineral resources. Then the question is, why Chinese goods are so cheap? Because of the natural resources, because of the minerals of Tibet, Uyghur region, and Mongolia. They colonize these areas so that they can profit from us. So we are in the West Coast. We have many politically correct, environmentally friendly people, who say, I drive Tesla because it's electric car. I wear 100% cotton clothes because it's environmentally friendly. But remember, 40% of that cotton clothes could be from Uyghur area. Lithium battery in your iPhone is from Tibet. So when your battery dies, remember, many Tibetans have died because of that battery. And rare earth is from Inner Mongolia. So that's why people are sending messages saying it's very suffocating. We are very rich in resources. Primarily because of that, we are colonized, we are abused. Why I say this is now, as Fukuyama said, the world is entering a dangerous era where autocrats and dictators are dominating. Democracy is backsliding. There are more non-democratic countries than democratic countries. And often the discourse is, oh, there's American model. One superpower, there's rising superpower, that's China. And between the two, people are given choices. And many say, maybe, oh, American model or Western model has double standards, hypocrisy, all that, which to some extent is true. But still, this model is a freedom-based model. The Chinese model is the model where Tibetans have been suffering, Uyghurs have been suffering, Mongolians have been suffering, Hong Kongers are suffering. Maybe Taiwan might suffer too. And we have lived under Chinese world system. It's nasty, it's suffocating. So choice is yours, and I hope you will choose on the side of freedom because you don't have to live a suffocating life. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mai Khôi, but you can call me Khôi, not Mai. And you know what? I used to be a pop star. But even at the height of my fame, even with all of the awards and attention, the government still censored me every time I performed. And I will never forget this one time when I was performing in a dress rehearsal for 5 censors. Suddenly, right in the middle of my song, one of them stood up and shouted at me, "Ngưng! Ngưng ngay lập tức! Ai cho phép cô mặc bộ đồ đó biểu diễn trên sân khấu? Thay đồ ngay! Nếu không tôi sẽ cấm cô biểu diễn suốt đời. Và tôi có đủ quyền làm chuyện đó. Cô có tin không?" Cộng hòa xã hội chủ nghĩa Việt Nam độc lập tự do hạnh phúc. Cộng hòa xã hội chủ nghĩa Việt Nam độc lập tự do hạnh phúc. Cộng hòa xã hội chủ nghĩa Việt Nam độc lập tự do hạnh phúc. Xin ông cho chúng tôi được đưa tiền cho ông, để ông cho chúng tôi được làm việc. Xin ông cho chúng tôi được dối lừa theo ông, để ông cho chúng tôi được ngu ngốc như ông. Xin ông cho cho chúng tôi được hát, cho chúng tôi được bày tranh ra ngắm, cho chúng tôi được yêu, cho chúng tôi được cúi lùn xin ông sự dã man tàn ác. Xin ông cho chúng tôi được phát hành sách, cho chúng tôi được đi lại tự do, cho chúng tôi được bảo vệ tổ quốc. Xin ông cho chúng tôi được chia sẻ thông tin, cho chúng tôi được làm từ thiện, cho chúng tôi được quyền như trong hiến pháp, quyền như trong hiến pháp, được quyền như trong hiến pháp. What do you know about Vietnam? Maybe some of you think that Vietnam was free after the war, but Vietnam is a one-party police state that doesn't allow any political opposition. There is no freedom of expression, no freedom of movement, no freedom of assembly, no freedom at all. In 2016, the Formosa Steel Company dumped 300 tons of toxic waste into the ocean off the central coast of Vietnam. For weeks, dead fish were washing up on our beautiful beaches. Thousands of us went peacefully into the streets, but the police were there too. Some of them dressed up like protesters to incite violence. Others stood in tight circles around us, so bystanders couldn't see inside, but everyone could hear the screams. I couldn't keep silent any longer. I was sick of performing for the censors. I was sick of being told what to wear, how to act. I was sick of seeing my people beaten up on the street. I wanted to make a change. So, on March 9, 2016, I nominated myself for the National Assembly representing my hometown. My nomination sparked a huge debate. Journalists were lining up. A reporter from the New York Times flew to Saigon to interview me. It became an international news story. No celebrity has ever nominated themselves for the National Assembly. People didn't know about their right to participate in politics until now. But the government was not happy about that. They tried to make me stop, insulted me, dismissed me. 2 weeks after my nomination, the police raided one of my concerts and shut down the show. When the news got out, all of my shows were canceled. Venues were afraid to book me. Musicians were afraid to work with me. I have been banned from singing in public in my own country since then. 1 month later, I opened up the newspaper and I found out I was rejected from the ballot. The published list of the candidates didn't include my name. I'd been erased. But I wasn't about to give up. I read another article about President Obama coming to Vietnam, and I thought, that's it. Obama, can we meet? Yes, we can.
President Obama, I want to meet you when you come to Vietnam in May. As a citizen, I want to talk about how America can help to improve government transparency and accountability. And I'm not alone. So when you come here in May, please make time to meet me and other civil society leaders. We need to talk to you.
Do you see? My video very beautiful, right? And it went viral. My video went viral, and I received an invitation from the US Embassy. My crazy plan had worked. But a friend of mine called me. Khôi, anh rể em vừa mới báo là Khôi đang bị theo dõi sát sao 24/24. Anh rể em là thư ký của thứ trưởng, Khôi hết sức cẩn thận. In Vietnam, among people old enough to work, 1 in 6 are either police officers or working for the police. Leading up to Obama's visit, more and more activists were arrested. My activist friend, Phạm Đoan Trang, was arrested on the way from Saigon to Hanoi for our meeting with Obama. And she's still in jail now. I turned off my phone and went into hiding. I slipped from hotel to hotel, out of back door, changed my hair and clothes until I was sure no one was following me. Then I came to a safe house. I couldn't sleep. All night long, I kept imagining my arrest. And when the sun rose, I took a taxi to the US Embassy. After many checkpoints, I was clear, and they brought me to a conference room in the Marriott Hotel. And there he was.
We have a very popular artist here who is speaking out on behalf of freedom of speech and expression and artists throughout Vietnam.
I was so excited sitting next to handsome, powerful President Obama. I told him, if you want to be our hero, use your leverage to put pressure on the Vietnamese government to release all political prisoners. You can't be our hero if you're just here to make some business deals. He looked at me with his sad face and said, Walter, where's thou the rock? Just be patient. Before you came, I dreamt of you. You, with your power to make wrongs right. For you, I put myself on the line. For you, I was prepared to do time. All around are ghosts and demons, serpents, snakes, and deadly creatures wanna catch me, kill me, burn me. once were the hope of my life. You once were the hope of my life. I saw your halo shining bright. Then you gave me some advice. Just be patient. 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 Just be fucking patient. You once were the hope of my life. Now I'm hopeless. After the meeting, I went back to my house and I saw the police were waiting to harass me. Obama, help me! But Obama was busy. He had other plans.
Next to President Obama's historic visit to Vietnam, for so long a bitter enemy of America, the president with smiles and a handshake for the Vietnamese president amid a new move between the two countries. And there was this unexpected moment today, dinner with American celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain. ABC's Bob Woodruff tonight with how that meal came together and word of a new arms deal and the sale of American planes now to Vietnam.
After Obama left, I realized we can't depend on foreign heroes to save us. That's a colonial mentality. We Vietnamese, we have to fight for ourselves. But I want to show the world that there is no freedom of expression in Vietnam. So when I heard Agent Orange was coming back to Vietnam, I made a plan. There is a saying in Vietnamese, peace on you. That's a sign of respect and welcome. So when Trump arrived, I went out to welcome him. Can you believe that I was the only person in a country of 100 million people who publicly protested against Trump? But when I left the scene, the police followed me on their motorbikes. I felt something bad would happen. I tried to shake them and went home. But just as I sat down on my sofa, the police and the landlord banged on my door. Boom, 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 boom. Ra khỏi nhà ngay, ra khỏi nhà ngay. Cô không được phép ở đây nữa. I knew there would be backlash, but backlash came from every direction. The activists I admire were against me because they supported Trump and his attitude toward China. The public at large was against me too, because they hated the idea of a woman being rude to a powerful old man. My friends abandoned me. The police were chasing me around Hanoi. I was attacked on social media. They called me a traitor, a whore, a bitch. I was so depressed. I thought maybe I'm a bad activist. Instead of building a movement, I just pissed people off. But one day, out of the blue, I received an email that I won the Václav Havel International Prize for Creative Dissent. I was full of hope again. I flew to Oslo to receive my prize. But back in Vietnam, the news about my prize was censored. And this is a video that my friend grabbed when he was watching news in Hanoi.
Vietnam has won an International Human Rights Award in Norway for using her fame to battle for democracy.
The screen says, this content is not appropriate. We will come back in a few minutes. Thank you for your patience. You know what that means, right? There is always someone sitting by a burden ready to erase me. I flew back to Vietnam after the ceremony. I went to the immigration and gave my passport to the official. He put it in the scan machine and beep, 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 beep. The police moved quickly in my direction. I just had enough time to text one word to my family: detained. After a very long day of interrogation, I was released, but not free. My fame would not protect me any longer. I knew one day soon I would join the other 200 political prisoners in Vietnam today. So I packed 2 suitcases and this guitar. That's all I brought with me to the US. I didn't have time to say goodbye to my friends, family members, and the activists I was leaving behind. I knew I just had 2 choices: either flee from Vietnam or let the government disappear me. So now I'm here. I feel free here. Free to speak, free to sing, free to express myself. I also feel free to get beaten or killed by the police. Free to drive 300 miles for an abortion. Free to breathe air thick with the smoke of wildfires. I can't go back, but I think about Vietnam every day. In Vietnam, many people like the status quo, but others waiting around for a hero to lead them to the promised land. I see the same thing here. But no one could change the world by themselves. That's a lie invented by the powerful to keep us powerless. I don't know if I will ever succeed in bringing free expression to Vietnam, but I'm still fighting. And I know I can't do it by myself. I need your support. And you all need to support each other. We all should be activists, even if it means being a bad activist like me. Thank you.
All right, welcome back. My name is Kyotaro Tsutsui, and I'm a senior fellow here, professor of sociology. I also co-direct the Center for Human Rights and International Justice. And I'm also deputy director of Asia Pacific Research Center, and we are delighted and honored to co-host this event. Welcome to Stanford for all of you, and thank you to Larry and Frank for the wonderful speeches that they gave. So this was a very powerful session, and as somebody who has been studying the efficacy of the international human rights regime, which consists of human rights institutions, human rights treaties, various organs hosted at the United Nations, European Union, and other international organizations. I was very moved and also intrigued by your approaches to moving things forward in terms of human rights advocacy. And I'm sure there are a lot of questions from the audience, so I'd like to make sure that we'll have enough time for Q&A. And from my end, I'd like to ask, throw out a few questions at you. First, I'd like to, this was a relatively contained, brief presentation, and I'm sure you have a lot more stories to tell about your activism. And I'm wondering if you could say a few words about what you couldn't say in your presentation about your approaches to activism, your methods, who did you approach, and why you choose it? Is it, some of that might be because of external constraints, but some of that might be options that you have and you made a conscious decision to choose your particular method. So if we could start, since we just talked about that with you two, if you could, we could start from the, well, in the order that you presented for this question, that would be great.
Thank you for asking the question. I came to the United States at the age of 18, not having a plan at all. I grew up wanting to become a dancer, which is totally not related to what I'm doing right now. And I still hope one day I can go back to becoming a dancer. And so I don't have to be involved in politics anymore, having to discuss authoritarian regimes every single day or even dreaming about them every single night. So I was thrown into this path or in this country. I did not choose to be there. However, after I decided to become an advocate, it was very tough to choose a focus. I always believe that there's a saying, start by step, right? Because only that you can achieve the smaller goals in order to achieve the bigger goals. And well, the Chinese human rights issue, it's a pretty big issue because it's not only in fact affecting people inside China, but also affecting people globally. And it's not only affecting ethnic groups like the Tibetans, like the Uyghurs, but it's also affecting broader Chinese communities as well. We know more recently, we know about the Chinese white paper movements where Chinese students protested against the COVID policies. And then a little moving back where there the Hong Kong protest where the Chinese government had the police brutalities in Hong Kong, cracking down and pro-democracy movement leaders. And but why did I focus on why did I choose to focus on forced labor? Uyghur forced labor, out of freedom of expression, gender-based sexual harassment, forced sterilization, feminist movement. They're all equally important, but I believe forced labor is the very reason that the Chinese government have been able to maintain its repressive policies for the past few years and have been even able to expand it for even to other countries. And the Chinese government is able to profit off forced labor practices or cheap labors. And that way, they're able to accrue massive amount of money to build more surveillance checkpoints, build more surveillance cameras, to abuse more people at the border. And for instance, in China, not only there are Chinese forced labor workers and Uyghur forced labor workers, there are North Korean forced labor workers, thousands of them, in seafood industry and various beauty industries as well. And the Chinese government has been working with the North Korean governments in exploiting their own people. So it's a very common tactic that authoritarian regimes do, or like they learn from each other, they copy from each other, and they cooperate with each other to abuse their own people and to make the most benefit for themselves to continue its abuses in the future. So that's why I chose the forced labor approach instead of the dancing and many more important topics. Yeah.
If I could follow up, can you say a little bit more about the Uyghur forced labor checker that you showed when you presented?
Yes. So a few years ago when the Human Rights Foundation reached out to our coalition to ask, like, what are some of the companies that are heavily being complicit in Uyghur forced labor? And because they had a wonderful team that was able to implement this plugin that you could download it. It only works on laptops, on computers, so not on phones. Once you add it to your Google Chrome, it's free, completely free. Whenever you shop, whether, for instance, you go to www.zara.com, let's say, when a company is, if there's evidence of being linked to Uyghur forced labor, you will see a banner pop up on the right top corner. It would say, oops, this brand might be tainted by Uyghur forced labor. Are you sure you still want to shop from there? You could choose yes or no. I mean, if you choose yes, I guess you just, yeah. If you choose no, then it will redirect you to a page, information page, where you can learn more about this issue. And it has many more brands. And I know that it now can function not only in the US, but several other countries as well. And hopefully, I know HRF team is working on getting it more brands included on the checker. So it's a very useful tool. And it also helps, people who are lazy like me, who don't want to spend 1,000 hours a day to do research every time before I shop, like, okay, which brands are complicit in forced labor? So this is a very quick tool. It just, you go to the website, immediately will pop up. It also have positive examples. If a brand had committed to end Uyghur forced labor, have committed to perform better and be more sustainable and ethical, then the banner will say, congratulations, this brand have tried everything they can to help ending Uyghur forced labor. You may proceed. So yeah, it provides not only, like a reminder of whether this brand is complicit, but also provides you an alternative list of things that you could be shopping from that are slightly safer.
That's great.
Before I handle this discuss, I apologize if I make any mistakes in English. I'm still learning English, which is hardest language ever in my life. So sometimes you need to be patient to understand what I'm saying. As I told in my speech, when I was 21, I made my life to come to South Korea and starting my new life without anyone. I'm still alone. I don't know what happened to my family members. I have no idea. But also there is a way that I can contact maybe my relatives, but I don't want to. After 3 hours, the 3 hours after escape, I heard my grandma's voice and I had nightmares for 6 months and decided not to contact my family members at all because I didn't want to think about my past. I want to look forward to becoming a better person that my grandparents can proud of me. And as you know, a lot of contents about North Korea, how hard it is to escape from North Korea through all the countries, China, Myanmar, or other countries. But it's not many contents, not many stories how North Korean defectors are struggling to adjust in a new society, caught because of the different language barriers, because different cultures, so many stuff. When I was let me give you an example. When I worked at a Paris Baguette as my first the part-time job, there are a lot of items that I couldn't remember, that I never experienced of tasting it. And I had to sell the product to the customers, but I couldn't keep up because I had to put the names on the screen that I'd never done in my life. And I had to explain what ingredients are in the bread. And I got fired after 1 month. And I had to figure it out, how could I survive in this new country? And 20% of North Korean defectors in South Korea are not satisfied with the new life in South Korea. Because there are 3 reasons. One is cultural differences, and the other one is psychological, the traumas, and third one is economical problems. Because of different accents, South Koreans discriminate North Korean defectors, and it's hard to make them hard to get a job. If you don't have food, how can you raise your voices? So a lot of organizations, a lot of people make activism to solve human rights issues in North Korea, but not many people focus on the issues of North Korean defectors. So what I do now, I do work in an NGO helping economic independence for North Korean defectors by giving them job opportunities and educating South Koreans how can cooperate with North Korean defectors in South Korea. For me, to solve human rights issues without embracing 35 North Korean defectors living in democratic society, we can't discuss human rights issues. 20,000 million people within in North Korea. That's what I do right now for the activism.
Wonderful. In your presentation, you mentioned that you were basically censored in appearing on South Korean TV show, and that's why you wanted to quit. Can you say a little bit about what kind, and you mentioned how, depending on who's in power in South Korea, you were kind of pushed in a certain direction in your discourse. Can you say a little bit more about the censorship?
Yeah, so the TV show was very popular among North Korean defectors and also extends to South Korean audiences. So when there was a power like a conservative party, they do switch the topics like please that conservative party in power. And also they also focus on the issues when what is the other opposite part? The conservative progressive party. I realized that audiences don't have freedom to choose what they want to hear. Only that they spread the issues, the people who have a power to share their stories. Even me, like someone who is from North Korea, have different perspectives about life and experiencing of horrible situations, couldn't share our own stories because the people who have a power to control our freedom of expression, freedom of opinions.
Great, thank you.
I hope, as the question why, given my age, I hope I've graduated from that why, because I will go way back to my teen years, so that'll take 2 hours to explain. But I just want to say this, I served as the president of Tibetan government exile for 10 years, from 2011 to 21. From 2011 to 17, it was very difficult. Everybody want to engage with China, do business with China, so wherever you go from capitals to capitals, and they reject you, they don't want to meet with you, So you make your case. Even I was not allowed to enter the State Department, White House for a whole 10 years because I was president of government exile. They don't recognize government exile. That was the reason, excuse they gave. But whenever the interim, Syrian government was formed, they were going to the 7th floor and meeting with Hillary Clinton, and the interim government of Venezuela, it was just formed a few weeks ago, and they come to White House and State Department. You can clearly see this double standard, right? And then imagine other capitals around the world, right? But since 2017, it has changed because there's a consensus in DC now. China is adversary number 1. Large number of European countries are coming around. India is coming around, Japan, all that. When I see these, I say it's a vindication, right? We've been making the case for 60 years. You have no idea what you are dealing with. The Chinese world order, the system. And the thinking, the mindset was that, oh, Tibet is an exception, is sad, but we can do business with China. We can shake hands with Chinese president. We can get along. China will come to our side, become more free and more democratic, right? It didn't, But we've been saying that for 60 years. You don't trust this. So then I started making I make this argument, and it can be substantiated, that if you want to understand China, you must understand Tibet. If you don't understand Tibet, you will never understand China. My point being, for example, 2013, Xinjiang became a Belt and Road Initiative. So there's a we'll build road, we'll build railways, we'll build seaport. It will benefit you and it will benefit us. Prosperity will all over the world. And my argument is, Tibet was promised the same thing. We'll build one road connecting China to Tibet. Tibetans will prosper, we will prosper, right? That road was built, trucks came, tanks came, guns came, occupied a country. The one road has become 100 roads leading to all our natural resources now. Right? One railway line is bringing heavy machines to exploit more. So we've been saying, Belt and Road Initiative, people were like, there were like headlines, glowing headlines, China is doing something for the prosperity of the world. I said, hey, it happened to Tibet. No one listened. Then the surveillance system, You know, there are 300 million surveillance cameras in China, and China is the most controlled watch country in the world. The first surveillance camera was put in Chokhang Temple in 1987. Right? Now the Chinese surveillance system is bought in 70 plus countries. The internal security of even Vietnam, which is an ally of America, right? All over, they buy Chinese surveillance system, but the DNA of the surveillance camera starts in Tibet. So I can go on. For example, the martial law was imposed in March 1989 in Tibet. Then martial law was imposed in Beijing in June 1989. For example, the Tibet laws, Tibetan scholars were denied visa to enter Tibet, right, in early 2000. When it happened, all the China scholars said, no, but we get visas to go to China. The Tibet law is an exception. Then now they are denied visa, right? Journalists were not allowed to visit Tibet initially. Later, journalists were not allowed to. Now they're constrained to visit China as well. NGOs, foreign NGOs were banned first in Tibet, right? Then they were banned in China, now all over the world. So what happens in Tibet happens in China and happens around the world. So that's the argument we try to make. And then recently there was a Chinese scholar who was a fair-minded scholar who was making a presentation about how American imposed tariffs on trade with China is so unfair, right? And it's Donald Trump, who did this, right? So it's not, beneficial to Americans or Chinese, so we must have dialogue so we can have a mutually beneficial solution. And our counter-narrative is, hold on a second, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been saying, let's have dialogue to seek autonomy for Tibetans for 30 years, and Chinese government has been ignoring us, So it's the counter-narrative. And the list goes on. And then the natural resources exploitation, it happened in Tibet. Now, when people read about Uyghur, genocide in Uyghur area, Mongolians, Hong Kong, maybe Taiwan, that's what we've been saying. You are dealing with a regime, with a system, that threatens internally in Asia as a whole and the whole world. That's the system we live under. And you all must learn lessons from Tibetans, because we are the victims, because when China moves an inch or even a needle, we feel the pain. Unless China, uses acts, Washington, D.C. and Brussels and other countries, they don't even notice, you see. So when we say something, you better listen. So that's the point I try to make. And then when I was listening to the Chinese official, he said, this unfair trade tariff. But then people forget, in 1996-7, Denmark tried to move a resolution about human rights violation in China and mentioned Tibet at the UN Human Rights Commission. China cut off trade with Denmark, imposed tariff. And Liu Xiaobo was given Nobel Peace Prize. But Nobel Peace Committee, which has nothing to do with Norway as a country, China imposed tariff on Norway, and banned, they said, we will not go to buy your salmon, And Slovakia, right, president was threatened, Sweden, a Swedish citizen, Chinese publisher used to publish books critical of China, and he was, bathing in the beach of Taiwan. He was picked and then, sentenced in China, and Sweden said, please don't do that, he's our citizen. Tariff was imposed, trade was banned. Australia said, well, what is the origin of COVID? We want to know. Tariff was imposed, trade was banned. So that's what China has been weaponizing trade and tariff for 30 years. So people should know that, So now when America imposes tariff, it's so unfair. Even Americans are saying, that's unfair, it harms us as well, So these are the narrative, the bigger picture we should know. So we are not speaking simply as victims. We are speaking of our experience so that you won't be next. So unfortunately, Hong Kongers used to say, Tibet first, we could be next. They used to have banners. It happened to them. Now Taiwan is the same. It could happen. And then now, Asian countries are saying. So we've been the victim, but we are also a witness. Now, because there's a consensus in DC and Brussels everywhere, it's in a way, it's a vindication. It's almost like, we told you so. Now, if you don't listen to us now, it's at your own peril.
And I imagine Tibetan government in exile is among the earlier ones, maybe the first one to be established, and it's probably one of the most influential, most present in these discussions. Some of us had a chance to meet with leadership of the government in exile of Myanmar. I'm wondering if there's any kind of coalition of government in exile. Do you have interaction with those other leaders of government in exile of repressive countries?
I didn't give you this pointer, right? We didn't discuss about
it.
Because I'm writing a book about this. I have to pitch in, right? So I'm writing a book on how to set up and run democratic government exile. My argument is that the rise of autocratic system, democratic backsliding, it's an ironic because the funding for promotion of democracy has increased by hundreds of millions. Promotion for election has increased by billions of dollars, okay? Funding is increasing, activists are increasing, more organizations are increasing, but democracy is backsliding, freedom is backsliding. So there's a contradiction. Because those who study democracy, Larry Diamond included, Schumpeter, Dahl, and everybody, they say democracy assumes state. Democracy assumes territory. They don't study exile. It's outside the purview of conventional academic thinking about democracy. Those who study about exile, freedom fighters, we all talk about movements and activism. They don't study democracy. So Tibetan government exile is a unique blend where there is a philosophical and theoretical contradiction between democracy and freedom movement, because freedom movement means unity, single leadership, single voice. But then democracy means instead of single leadership, there has to be opposition. Instead of single voice, there has to be freedom of speech. Instead of unity, there has to be diversity. There's a fundamental contradiction between the two, yet Tibetans have managed to blend this contradiction and run a democratic government exile. So that's my prescription to Venezuelans and Afghans and Belarus and everybody. Form government exile, have a united front, not a Chinese united front, okay? Our democratic united front, because that's what the autocratic leaders fear the most. They will not fear if exile, let's say Hong Kongers, any dissidents, successful individuals, they don't fear. It's organized front they fear the most. So government exile is difficult to form. So I'm writing a manual. You can form government exile, you can form a parliament exile, you can form advocacy in exile, you can form Democrat Party in exile. I did 15 years of academic research, I wrote my dissertation on it, and I have 10 years of experience running a government exile. So I've also asked, contributing writers from Burma, Belarus, Afghan, Syrian, the Venezuelan, and Uyghur, and Hong Kongers, and Mongolians, all to write. So this becomes a manual for all the dissidents and exiled people to how to set up and run government exile. Now, but there are, again, I can go on and on, but I can give at least 10 challenges. When you form a government, there will be 10 challenges. Host country is very important. Host country can derail you or help you. Right? Corruption is one of the reasons why many government exile fail. And co-optation, right? And then assassination, division, trauma, egos. There are a lot of challenges when it's not that easy. And we have succeeded. So we want to share this model. Now, for example, Burmese, what they say is, they did form government exile. It was a failure. Now they come up with a new model, which is interim government, but they are present inside Burma because they control 1/3 of the territory, and they have presence at the border and also outside. So they don't call it government exile because that's a bad name, right? But then they have also moved from civil resistance to violent arms resistance, because they say that's the only way we can defeat the juntas, right? So there are many models of government exile, and Burmese model is one. Right? So, if you do the government exiles have succeeded. Polish government exile, Spanish government exile, Baltic embassies in exile have succeeded, right? Exile leaders like, Bulgaria's prince returned back and became the prime minister of Bulgaria, ANC, African National Congress, was exiled, returned back, brought democracy in Africa. UNITA of Angola, right? So list goes on. There's so many success stories, Ramos Horta was an exile. I've met him many times. Now he's the leader of East Timor, right? So there are many exile leaders who have successfully brought democracy back home. The exile governments who have replicated and replaced the autocratic system, and many government exiles have disappeared and failed and collapsed. So learn lessons from all this and be a manual. And then the way to counter rise of autocratic system is to have a government exile, a democratic one. That's bring unity and challenge. So I hope this book, again, the exiles and dissidents, they lack funds, right? So this is not to make a bestseller and sell it for $100 a book, but I want to make it an open access, online, accessible, very Buddhist, Dalai Lama's follower kind of book, okay? When it's released, you better click and then make it useful.
Fantastic, great. Last but not least.
Yeah, I started to involve in activism since 2016 by my election campaign. Before that, just like most of Vietnamese in my country, I didn't know about democracy. I didn't even know what freedom of expression is. Because we've been brainwashed for a long time. Like after the war, the Communist Party lead the country and we've under their control and we've been brainwashed. And at the point, they opened a little bit. So we have internet in my country. That's where people can access to the world. And we kind of know, what is democracy? What is the real democracy? And what is freedom? And because I'm an artist, many people ask me why I was a pop star, why I became a dissident artist, an activist. Because the artist inside me cannot stand the censorship system. The artist inside me want to fight for freedom. Because I've seen many people in my country, many artists in my country suffer under the censorship system. But they didn't know how to change, how to make a change. How can the country become democracy if they don't know what freedom of expression is? So my activism focused on freedom of expression. But since I became an activist, the government just make a lot of problems to my life, and I was forced to leave my country at the end of 2019. The government continued to arrest all of my activist friends. Some of them was forced to live in exile like me. And recently, the government has been moving the target to NGO, climate activists, scientists. That is their new target. And the big challenge is we all in exile or in jail now. We cannot make a movement. We cannot do anything. And the world also happening a lot of wars, the rise of authoritarians. The big challenge is how can we get attention to have support from the world. People in Vietnam, they have changed their mind, their life. But right now, they don't know what to do. They don't know how. They don't know what to do to make the change inside the government. And I'm trying to do. Yeah.
And I must ask, have you been able to reach President Obama since that time? Any interaction with him? Or his
After
office?
that meeting, I've never met Obama again.
Okay, that's somewhat disappointing. But what you said about how activists cannot rely on foreign heroes and heroines to come down and save the local community, that's a very powerful message. Right. And I'm wondering, I study how the international human rights regime could or could not help improve local practices. I'm wondering if you can speak to what kind of institutions have been somewhat helpful, like whether it's United Nations Human Rights Forums or the EU forums or ASEAN, or more like human rights NGOs like Human Rights Foundation or Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. What outside entities have been particularly helpful for your activism? Maybe you can start from here this time.
Yes. International organizations have been very helpful for us because without their help, we cannot do anything. We were forced to leave the country, cut off the connections from the country, and we're still trying to fight. And all of the international organizations are enemies of our governments. I think the best way to do right now is just somehow we gathering together, we come together and connect together to make something outside of the countries to support for the new young activists in the country that still fighting. So what I'm doing is going to perform, to speak a lot, and we can spread the message about our country. So we have more support from people.
That's wonderful. Spreading information, raising awareness, those are particularly important methods. Anything to add from?
United Nations or international organizations, now with the Ukraine war, clearly it's shown its limitations now, Even WHO with the COVID, right? Taiwan has been very successful at the, in fight against SARS, but they were not even allowed to have, forget about membership, okay? Not even to have a role to play to share their expertise, But I personally think the veto power should be gotten rid of. It's just too outdated, Because the fact that Russia has veto power, United Nations just cannot do anything about Ukraine. The Secretary General of United Nations just cries and screams and shouts and says, it's wrong in Ukraine, what's happened in Ukraine, invasion of one country by the other. You can't do anything. It's just useless. So I think the veto power should be removed. And the founding fathers or the founding members of the United Nations felt this is the discussion group where you should talk to each other. They should have right to discuss, no veto power. Because many people advocate expansion of Security Council, and India is one of the potential members. I have full sympathy for that, but I still feel more members of the Security Council veto power means once they abuse, that's like you have given license to kill. So just get rid of veto power, and then allow all the members have equal right. Even then, it's a challenge. Genocide of Uyghur people is real. But then when the United members, start voting, 51 countries supported a resolution, a mild resolution. Okay, 150 countries nearly didn't vote. So it's really lopsided. So, and then as far as Tibet is concerned, as I said, bold countries like Denmark or others, right, they try to bring a resolution. I've been to UN Human Rights Commission. When it was subcommittee also, I've been there. They just allow you to make your point. That's it. It's just a discussion group. If you expect they'll come and vote and support you, not possible at all. So I think major reforms, are needed. Otherwise, it's just a name. Those victims who suffer the most don't get any support at all.
So, what is the best way of helping this activism as an external entity? I can say, of course, there are a lot of international organizations or social enterprise to help people who don't have rights. But in my view, I think the power of changing is within ourselves. Someone like me who is from dictatorship without any freedom of rights and now living in democratic country and with a better life, better hope, it is the best way that I can influence people who are born with the freedom in this society. So they can think about this value of freedom and then help others who don't have voices. So for me, that is the best way that I can solve the problem of North Korea. And the other one, I can say the economic independence for the minority people who don't have much rights as majority groups in democratic society. Because why I say this? If someone who is economically stable, they are more likely to participate in the democratic activism and engagement, also allowing them to broad different voices, which are the fundamental aspects of democracy. It will contribute to the inclusive democracy. So for me, it's helping North Korean defectors or other minority people for economic independence also is the best way that the organizations or individuals have to focus on.
Great.
I'm on the same page with Lobsang on this. Sorry for being critical, but UN had repeatedly proven that they have failed the human rights impacted groups. Just a couple of years ago, the former UN High Commissioner, Michelle Bachelet, was finally, after arranging it for 1,000 times, they finally was able to visit China and visit the Uyghur region. And after the so-called investigation, and the former High Commissioner was not even able to release the report, an adequate report, until the last day of her office.
Last hour.
Last hour, yes.
Midnight before she
released. She literally the 1 hour before she was going to be ending her position, she was finally able to release a report, which was having very mild language, such as maybe constitutes of crimes against humanity. So very mild languages, even though there are mounting evidence proving that there's genocide happening in the Uyghur region. And on top of that, also, Lobsang mentioned about the veto power. If you're looking at UN now, one of the worst perpetrator of women's rights violator is now sitting as a chair of the Women's Committee at UN. So when you are looking at such evidence, you will really see how ineffective the whole UN system is now, and with what's happening in the Middle East, it's just so many more proof. Although it doesn't mean that we should stop working with the UN, because when you're seeing something is failing, you need to help them to become better. So same thing with China. When you see the Chinese government is continuously perpetrating human rights abuses in various regions with the various people, you do not just ignore them and let them continue doing them. You help them become better. And also, I'm not sure how many students are from China here. I think in order to really help with the movement, I think we need to first adjust our mindset. if we criticize a country or criticize an entity or criticize any political policy, does not mean hating on or canceling on that country or that culture. It is to help improve the situation of that country, of that entity. I think I grew up in China, spent like decades there. The education system that I grew up in made me believe that any negative things that I voice about my people, my neighborhood, my country means I'm hating on my country, that I am no longer patriotic. But that should not be the narrative. If your kids made a mistake, if they push someone in school, are you gonna be like, keep going, good job? Or are you gonna say, oh, this is wrong, we should be doing something different next time and provide better solutions? Of course you're going to choose the latter because you love the kid. So I really wanna like bring up the idea of like for Chinese students, yes, I believe you have, I'm sure you have the, you know, like concerns of whether you should criticize your country or certain policies or voice your support for any group that are not your own. Yes, I understand where your concerns are coming from, but also we need to adjust our mindset of how, when we're correlating criticism as hate, that's different. You could relate them as love as well. And it is helping your own country to become better. So this, because I've seen very limited support from the Chinese pro-democracy movements when it comes to support for Tibetan groups, support for Mongolians, for Uyghurs. Oftentimes they are only wanting to voice concerns over you know, human rights violations happening inside mainland cities, but not that's happening in Tibet or Uyghurs. And then on top of that, I think it's really important to form coalitions of a very diverse group. So it's natural for people to have different opinions, and a normal society will allow more than one voices. However, when we are seeking for support or help, we tend to look for organizations that align with our political views. That is natural. However, we should not discriminate people that do not directly align with your political views. So I myself, I identify as a liberal. However, I work with people who have very diverse, diverse political views. With the coalition that I'm part of, there are people who are trade unionists. There are people who are anti-communist. There are people who are pro-communist. There are people who are Jewish groups. There are Muslim groups. They're so diverse. We have student groups, faith-based groups. We have churches to synagogues to mosques supporting the whole you know, initiative of ending Uyghur forced labor. And I think the most important thing is to finding the common ground. We all have one goal, which is to end the human rights abuses of whatever cause that you care the most about. Find your allies. Even if you're not allies in other aspects, you do not have to agree with everything. Even twins raised by the exact same pair of parents would have different opinions. So total strangers on the other side of the world, well, of course, will believe in different things. They grew up listening to different types of news. I do not believe everything that Fox News said. I probably do not believe most of the things that they say a lot of times, but that does not mean that the audience that are listening to Fox News are not important, because those are the very audience that you should be reaching. Or if you're a Fox News listener and you think that CNN is not, or BBC is not a worthwhile news agency to talk to or to be reaching out to, but no, the audience is the very ones that you need to be targeting to have them to be joining your cause. So yeah, forming a coalition of diverse group I think is very important. And with the coalition to end forced labor in the Uyghur region that Human Rights Foundation is part of, my organization, which is the Worker Rights Consortium, is part of. Worker Rights Consortium is a pure labor rights investigation group. We only talk to workers normally, and Human Rights Foundation talk to activists around the world. It's a very different group, even though, but we all have one common thing. We care about, you know, human rights, and I think finding that common ground and forming a coalition will be the most effective than just talking to one entity or one group of people.
Right. Thank you. Should we move to, I think it's about time that we move to Q&A. I have a few more questions, but if you have any questions, please raise your hand. And yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Grace, and I'm from Thailand. And similar in our country, we've gone from authoritarian regime to military coup d'etat. From recently, the weaponization of like government institutions to suppress opposition parties and also towards deeply rooted corruption. And so I would love to hear your all thoughts about what do you think are the key factors for us to mobilize democracy, considering that the people in power will always come up with different types of rhetoric against the democratic movement?
Who would like to? I think depoliticizing and whatever issue that you care about is the key. Oftentimes during the movement, people tend to politicize heavily the issue in order to get attention of the governments that you want the help from, and because oftentimes the political motive is the one that drives that government to put on action. For example, in terms of the Uyghur work or the Tibetan work, is because there is a U.S.-China, political tension. We all admit it's there, and when the U.S. wants to, whether it's sanctions or propose laws, there are political motives behind it, and which is driving many people far away from joining this effort in pro-democracy, ending Uyghur forced labor, ending the, bring back, self-determination for Hong Kongers, for Tibetans. People are reluctant in joining because they think, oh, it's feeding into the propaganda or feeding into the U.S.-China war. So I think finding whatever ways you are using, I think it will apply differently for different cause, but depoliticizing issues and going back to the same talking points, forming coalitions of people, finding that one mutual common ground with all the groups, no matter how, what their political agenda is, no matter what their political motive is, or no matter what their ideology is, find that one common ground and then depolitize the issue together, make it a very focus on human rights instead of other aspects of it. I think that would be a key factor.
No, it's a global, really, Larry and Fukuyama, and I subscribe. No, it's really a global challenge, right? There are more countries which are not democratic. Means increasingly, even those who get elected, right, in their second term, they lean more towards non-democratic system. If they get elected the third time, backsliding happens. They start censoring, and discourage institutions and curtail institutions. So whatever is happening in Thailand, it's just a global trend. But then they all are forming alliances, right? For example, in Thailand or Vietnam, you just name it. The internal security system is bought from China. Right? For example, physically, all the surveillance cameras, right? And then they study each other. They learn from each other. And democratic countries, we keep debating, and then it's democracy. I subscribe to democracy because the foundation is freedom, right? It has own pitfalls and weaknesses, but this is a better option than a non-democratic system because we are the victims. We've been suffering, right? So this is a global threat. And then I don't want to say your generation, it's a bit unfair, right? Because we lived through post-Soviet Union, Berlin Wall collapse, at least 30 years. Larry, we had democracy, freedom, So you're getting a raw end now. Climate change, you will suffer, right? More autocratic system, more surveillance system, that's also a fact. And then now, the lack of autocracy and democracy is very similar to at the beginning of First World War and Second World War. I mean, there is an element of that. It's very similar, right? So, and then there is a likely war, right? Thucydides' trap of the 16, great wars that took place between the number 1 and number 2 in the world. 12 times it was settled through war, right? So you have 75% chances. During your time, there will be Third World War, okay? So it's very unfair, unfortunately, but that's a fact. You all have to shoulder these responsibilities. And Martin Luther King said, let freedom ring. You have to fight for freedom.
Thank you. I'm in deep admiration of all of your courage and work and the example that you set for the generations to come. I think something that we all would recognize is how difficult it is for a movement for democracy and freedom to finally succeed, right? When North Korea will finally be over, when the Chinese Communist Party will finally be over. It's a pretty tiring journey. Your friends may leave you, people don't listen, it's the wrong time, and you fundraise, and you talk to people, a lot of time spent in loneliness. You know, it's not every day that you get to go to conferences at Stanford. Most of your time was probably quite different. How do you keep yourself going and in a good spirit in exile for a cause that is eternal?
No, I'm Buddhist, you know. We believe in mortality, you know. So we say, hey, that dictator is bad. Don't worry, he'll die. So all the dictators will die. We don't have to worry about it. It's a fact. It's inevitable. All great powers collapse. We have 2,000 years of history in the world, right? So in this just is 100 years, like 7 empires collapsed, you know, from Ottoman Empire to Austro-Hungarian to, you know, you just name it. So it's inevitable. So as a Buddhist, we believe in law of impermanence. Nothing is permanent. So don't worry about it, you know. So our job, again, that's why our job, you know, we have long-term perspective. Our job is not that I will bring down that dictator, but I will be part of that bridge who will connect me to the new second coming generation who will continue to fight. When that happens, we are there to restore democracy and freedom. So that should be your perspective, you know. So it's, as I said, it's very tiring to take, you know, a flight from Boston to here, and flight is delayed, airport is boring, and as hotel rooms are always boring, you know. But then there's a larger cause. Because again, as a Buddhist, we are always told, you know, West, you celebrate birthdays. You are born, they get so excited. Then they get midlife crisis. I'm 50, oh my God, there's so many candles, right? But Tibetans, we are taught, we don't celebrate birthdays. We are taught to look at life differently. You are born, you will die. Death and birth are two sides of the same coin. Now you accept the fact that you are going to die. What will you do while you live? That matters. My job is to carry the flag of freedom till I die. And I die happily. So that I don't get burned out, I don't get stressed out, you know, because I say, you know what, I'm carrying this responsibility. This is a global, civilizational, humanities cause. I want to be the good side. Because, you know, I'm Buddhist, I want to be Buddha. I want to attain Buddhahood, right? So you have to earn good karma for that. So this is my selfish reason why this is how I earn my good karma. So I'm come here, my karma has doubled in my account. I know that. And the dictator's karma going down. He will suffer a lot in hell. I know that. I have a lot of testimonies from hell. You know, all the dictators, I know they suffer a lot. We get the penthouse in our next life. They get a dark cell. That's karma.
I cannot stress that. It's fantastic. I mean, sometimes I'm so struggling to talking about same issues about North Korea, but nothing has changed. Still, North Korean regime grab the power to control and suppress individual human rights. So thank you for recognizing my tiredness of activism. Besides that, what I do is I do work at an NGO, support North Korean defectors' economic independence, and with a less paying job than people in corporation, but I can earn more values than any other people earn a lot of money because there is a value that I can do something for my people. And when I see the results, like for example, a few months ago, 2 North Korean defectors got a job at a big law firm. That made me so happy, and with that energy, I can keep going my life, facing all the issues, maybe internally or externally. And also this time, meet you guys, support North Korean human rights and all the individual human rights in this country carries me to keep going for my future and for my hope.
Yes, the same here. Just only hope that things that you have to lean on to keep going. You're sometimes frustrated about something, but hope will give you energy to keep going.
For me, I try my best to recognize the small wins. And I think that's my suggestion whenever young Uyghur activists come to me and say, how do you deal with burnouts? I said, burnouts oftentimes is coming from overworking yourselves and not looking at the achievements at all. So that's how you get burnouts. And I've been doing this since the moment I stepped foot in the US about 11 years ago. But yes, the Chinese government might have continuously, perpetrating human rights abuses in the Uyghur region and in many other areas in China. However, that doesn't mean there has not been any positive change. I think it's important to recognize every positive steps, every step by step. For instance, few years ago, majority of the people in this room, I'm sure, have never even heard of the Uyghur people. Maybe until very recently, you probably learned, oh, there are Muslims in China? I did not know that. That's a small win for me. I tried really hard to achieve that. For many years, I went all around the world, anywhere that would not deport me back to China, that I told them who the Uyghurs are. And I made sure to let people know Uyghurs. And when they hear this term, they will recognize, and it will ring a bell and what is happening to them. That is a small win. Well, I would consider that a big win. And Uyghur people fought for decades for that to happen. That doesn't mean that Uyghur people are free by having their names recognized, but that's the first step. A few years ago, I would not have dreamed of having a legislation that is dedicated to raising awareness on Uyghur people. Now there are 3 in the US. Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, Uyghur Human Rights Protection Act. I would not have dreamt that. That's wins. Those are big wins. And people fought for decades for that to happen. I think that keeps me going. I'm dedicated to have more legislations or more detailed, more effective ways of implementing these laws to happen. And I'm actively working with the CBP, Custom Border Protection, in helping them with implementing the current import ban in a more adequate and rigorous way, more enforce it in a better way. And also, I think we need to learn to give ourselves credits. Many human rights activists were way too humble, and we do not recognize what we have achieved. And we just say apologize all the time. No, the dictators should be apologizing to us. And we should recognize all the years of efforts and time we have dedicated into this, the sleepless nights. And when we're sleeping, all the nightmares that we've been having, we should give ourselves credits. And all these are, I consider them as small wins as well. And the matter of fact that you are asking this question, that is a small win. And I think we should all recognize that, because people are seeing us. That means you have seen our work. And hopefully today or tomorrow you will bring our messages to the next person, and that person will be connected to another person. I forgot where I read it from. Every person can be able to connect to someone from the other side of the world through 11 connections. And we never know that who our messages will be delivered to, and where it will be delivered to, and how it's going to be impacting them, and who will eventually be able to trigger a change. And I believe in the butterfly effects as well. It's the first time people ringing the bell of who the Uyghurs are led to the passage of a sanction or with the whole release order or an import ban. And with the voting of certain legislations in a country, I think those are all part of the movement. And you might not see it at that moment, but we should recognize that we're all part of that. We've been contributing to it. It will take time. And this will be a big fight, and that is okay.
I would like to congratulate Stanford for hosting this forum, and also I would like to thank you, the panel, for having this discussion. I have a lot of admiration for you, for the kind of work that you do. I know it takes a lot of effort and difficulties at times, and I'm support you guys whenever I can. With that being said, as American, I think we need to be aware that everything is spoken here, is all a tangent, a scale, right? Vietnam, China, whatever, and US. The fact that we are here able to discuss this is a big plus, but we are not absolute ideal, right? There might be freedom of expressions. There's no freedom of expression in Vietnam. In fact, that we can talk here is great, but there's a lot of information that we don't hear. We think that we we have freedom of expression, that we hear the truth here. And I beg you to dig deeper, look for alternative sources instead of just the mainstream media, because we know places like in the Middle East right now, there's a genocide going, and we are, in the US, American, we are complicit in this genocide, and the news media is not talking about it so much. It's very important that we're looking for alternative news sources. There's freedom, human rights, oppression in the Middle East, in Gaza, and we're not talking about it. So it's important to point that out. We don't have total freedom of expression. There's a lot of silence in the US when there's a lot of human rights, freedom. You know, a lot of journalists killed in Gaza because there's certain power there, not allow their voices to be heard. Okay. The fact that we are here is great, and we are on a better tension scale than in Vietnam and China, but be aware that we are not completely free, and the information we receive are not completely honest. That's all I have to say.
Hi, thank you first so much for being here. My biggest question, I guess, is when you come to these forums, when you speak to all these people, what would your biggest piece of advice be for what to do? I'm half Chinese, I've never been to China, I read in the news about all these horrible different human rights abuses and feel really powerless as to what I myself can do. So what are your suggestions as someone, for me, for example, as somewhat of an outsider, to be able to help and how to aid these crises that are happening across the world?
I mean, I don't know, everyone has their own values to find themselves. I can say happy with your life. I mean, there are a lot of tons of things that I can say. Engage with the human rights, and then share the contents, what you see about abusing human rights issues in any other countries. I can say that, but my advice is that happy with your life in this country, and try to appreciate what you have right now, not things that what you don't have, because what you have right now is that not many people, like North Korean people, 25 million people in North Korea, do not have. So appreciate the value of freedom and democracy, and share the value with the others by engaging in activism, like with the HRF and any other international related NGO, and dream big, and then maybe start your company, whatever, and the position, and hire minority group, people who doesn't have their own voices, who doesn't have much opportunities as like majority people in this country. That's what I want to say.
I think as individual, you can just talk with your friends about your concern about the issues that are happening around your life, and choose a topic to follow and raise awareness for people around you to get their attention about things, what's happening now. And you can support us by many different ways. Like if you like to support one organization that support for Vietnamese political prisoners or Chinese political prisoners, some organizations like that, you can support them. So that is one of the way that you can help us to fight.
Yeah, if you're asking individually, then it is important to be, give yourself informed, whether it's Tibet or North Korea or Vietnam or Uyghurs or Mongolians or Hongkongers. Now, you can subscribe to those pages, right? And then you get daily updates. Or you just have to like, and then algorithm will do it and you will be flooded with all the information you need. First, keep yourself informed. Now, if you want to be an activist, then I say if you want to be an activist, don't have expectations. I remember meeting Ramos Horta of East Timor. He said, I was just new, and I said, hey, Ramos, you've been doing this for some time, and how should I keep myself, strong? And he said, you know what? Just keep doing, keep speaking, keep traveling. And he said one day he got invited from Midwest, somewhere from Midwest America, and he changed 2 flights. And one young guy drove him to the venue. And he said there were 6 people waiting, you know. And then, but he spoke to 6 people. The next day he spoke to 60 people, 600 people. But then other day, you know, he spoke to another 10 people. He said, don't have expectations, just keep at it. And then right in front of my eyes, actually, East Timor got independent. He became foreign minister and president, you know. So there are so many examples. Right in front of our eyes, actually, so many successes have happened. Right here. So you just have to keep at it. I have spoken in front of 10,000 people. Yesterday I spoke in front of 400 Tibetans. And I've spoken in various venues. So I say a very Buddhist notion of impermanence. Don't have expectation. I'm a messenger, right? I deliver message. But I am on the right side. I'm the good guy, right? I am fighting for civilization is at stake. Humanity is at stake. Freedom and democracy is at stake, right? So you have to choose. This is a generational fight. You have to choose. You're on the right side. You know, it's good to be right than wrong. You sleep better. And you have less stressful life. The dictators, they worry all the time. They're paranoid. You know, we sleep well. That's their loss, you know. So you will win. Ultimately, you will win, but you have to keep fighting. That's why when I got elected as Sejong, they said, oh, how you're dealing with China, how can you tackle this, you know? I said, that's not my job. I mean, that's my job, but that's not my immediate goal. Okay? If I make myself, that's my goal, then I'll be obsessed with the goal. Then I stress out about, you know, the goal, and then don't overthink. You overthink. But I said, my job is to be the bridge. Continue the fight, pass on the torch, continue the fight. One day Xi Jinping will be gone. And Communist Party is anyway, communism as a whole and Communist Party is just 100 plus years old. Buddhism is 2,500 years old. There's no competition to begin with. We are the big brother. We will win, right? So, you know, and it happened. That's how history is written, how this 7 empires collapsed or disintegrated in 100 years' time. Right? So the whole history to prove. And then philosophically, and then in life you have a choice to be a good guy or a bad guy. I say, I want to be a good guy. You win, ultimately. So glass is always half full. It depends how you look at it.
While everyone was speaking, I just wrote down 12 things for you to do.
One dozen recommendations.
Are you ready?
This is College Freedom Forum Declaration, 12 points. Go ahead.
Declaration. And it, most of them will apply to all causes. The first one is everybody kind of mentioned sharing, raising awareness, and share it with the next person you see. Start from your family, start from your classmates, start from your professors, start from your local coffee shop. Like when you're sipping coffee, did you know what happened in blah, 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 blah country? And my favorite phrase is, did you know? And it's a great way to break the ice. I mean, probably not genocide topics to break the ice if you're meeting them, but it's great to start a conversation. And also, but before sharing and raising awareness, I think a key point is to do your due diligence with the information that you have received and do research, because it's going to harm the cause that you care about even more if you happen to spread false information, even though if it's unintentional, because the next person might have done their research and realize that the information that you have spread might be false, and they completely deny that cause existence at the first place. So it would be counterproductive. And also, second one will be, I mentioned about the, talking to your classmates and your schools. There's still only very limited universities or high schools in the US even have a class or part of the class would be talking about the Uyghurs. That's the next thing you can do, whether you're a high school student, college student, master's students, you could talk to your dean, your department, whether they will hire a Uyghur professor or a professor that talks about the Uyghur region, talks about Tibet, talks about North Korea, talk about Vietnam, who are knowledgeable to teach students. So with every semester, there are new groups of activists that will be formed, hopefully after those classes. And then also download plugin from Human Rights Foundation that can help you shop more, ethically. And also when it talks about ethically, consider every penny that you spend, where are they going towards? And who are making those things that you're purchasing? Like, always ask that questions. And then except asking your own question to yourselves, where am I spending? Ask other people a question as well. Ask the companies. You can write to Zara, you can write to H&M, you can write to Shein. Where are you sourcing from? Why do you not disclose your supply chain data? Where are your supply chain data down to raw materials? Who are making this? How many hours are they working? How much are they being paid? What their conditions are? Most of the time, those companies won't be able to answer your question because they're guilty or they do not even know. That means they have failed their due diligence on their side. And also you can ask your schools, why haven't you started teaching about what's happening in China, what's happening in North Korea, what's happening in Vietnam? What have you done to help improve the situation, those human rights violations? And also you can ask your school administration and ask, where are the collegiate apparels made? When it's Stanford University shirt, Stanford University cup, Stanford University hat, or any other schools, where are they made? Who are making them? How much are they getting paid? Ask the same questions. And if your university or if your school can answer that, great. If they can't, maybe you can push more. You can go from there. And the next one will be identifying and joining coalitions of groups who share the same goal as you. And then also, I think one important thing is the very fact that we're having this panel is great because we're prioritizing impacted groups. And with whatever event that you want to host in the future, make sure to prioritize impacted groups. Invite individuals who are directly impacted because they themselves know the best what they need and what they want to be achieved in their homeland, in their community. And then, of course, cliche, donation. You can donate to organizations that have been doing a great job, and you never know, they might be suffering or they might just need that extra $5 from you. And any help actually counts. The extra $5 they could be contributing to getting a flash drive to North Korea, or they could be getting contribute to supporting a refugee's rent when they first landed in this country. So any help counts, and do not underestimate your support or your voice. And the other thing will be volunteering. So if you say, I do not have money, I'm barely, making ends meet, and also I'm new to this cause, I do not know what I'm doing. Volunteer to an organization who knows what they're doing, and you will learn from there. Trust me, you'll learn so fast from just doing your own research. And then also there are so many films, documentary films, support those documentary films, bring your friends. Instead of going watch some multinational marvels, trillion, billions of dollars involved, those kind of Hollywood stuff, go watch those, activist made films, documentaries. They risk their lives to get those footages out. They risk their families' lives, their people's lives to get those footages out. Yeah, spread them, let more people have access to it. Trust me, they're more entertaining than any of those Hollywood-made movies. And then the last one, I'm just repeating it, be happy with the small wins. Whenever small things you achieved, be happy with it, and don't be satisfied with it, because you will just stop there. But don't be satisfied. Be a little greedy, it's okay. But recognize the small wins and then keep going from there. Yep, that's my 12 items of homework for you today.
You don't have to do all 12 at the same time. Okay?
Yeah, take your time. But
just start with one or two.
One of us will grade it one day, eventually, next time when we meet.
That's a wonderful list, and that's a great note to end on. I think the international community scored a major win today, thanks to your sharing of insights and experiences with us. And I think there'll be an opportunity for everybody to talk to them after this with a reception. So please stay. And if you have any questions that you couldn't answer here, feel free to go up to them and ask questions and just say hi and share some ideas with them. So Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing all of your insights with us today. We're just going, although our program has concluded for the day, we just want to thank you again so much for your time, and we hope you'll take the insights that you've gained from this event far beyond the conference today. I'm joined on stage very quickly by Professor Gulika Reddy, who's the director of the Stanford Law School's International Human Rights and Conflict Resolution Clinic, to just conclude with a few words about careers in the human rights space.
Yeah, so I was tasked with talking about what the Human Rights Clinic does in a few minutes. But before I did that, I've been sort of fascinated with this, even from a academic scholarship perspective, on this question of how do you sustain or foster hope in classrooms and in the human rights field. And I was furiously typing on my phone as all of you were speaking, because it was just so energizing to hear the ways in which each of you foster hope in your own practice. Because I'm often, speaking of careers in human rights, I'm often asked by law students, is there any point getting into the human rights field? Is change even possible? And I think, your remarks today were a reminder that not only is change possible, but each of you have managed to contribute to such significant change in your own work. And I think your comments were also a reminder of, the human rights field doesn't have to be all gloom and doom. I found myself constantly chuckling when I was listening to your comments, because each of you are obviously, really badass and brilliant and creative human rights advocates, but you were also so funny in your descriptions of what gives you hope. So yeah, I think in terms of what the Human Rights Clinic does is it's a course at the law school where we equip students for careers in the human rights field. So it's a full-time commitment when Stanford students take it. So for a whole quarter, they don't take any other classes. And there's a seminar where we teach them human rights skills, basically, from the human rights and conflict resolution field, and then they apply those skills to different projects around the world. And currently, the clinic is working in 3 different areas. So one is equality and non-discrimination, and we're working primarily on issues around sexuality and race. So we're working with a coalition of trans groups in Jamaica to advance LGBTQ rights there, and we're also working with civil society in Uganda. Last year, there was an anti-homosexuality act that was passed in Uganda that homosexuality was already criminalized, but this act imposes the death penalty for certain instances of homosexuality. It also makes it criminal to, as a landlord, even rent an apartment to someone in the community, or as a doctor to provide healthcare services, or as a restaurant owner to even serve food to someone in the community. And the students have been working with activists there to challenge the constitutionality of that legislation. And as you were all talking about small wins, I remember last quarter, one of the students asked them, how do you engage in this work in the face of setbacks? And one of them said, you wouldn't have a setback if you hadn't made progress. So for us, we think about setbacks as a sign that we have made some progress. And often there's a lot of pressure on the human rights field to show success and change. And they shared, sometimes with the human rights field, you're trying to advance change, but sometimes you're also working really hard to make sure we don't move backwards. So I think much of the clinic is, teaching students skills, of course, but also teaching them, how do you stay resilient and creative and hopeful in the work that we're doing? So that's one bucket of rights. We also have rights on a bucket on rights across borders, where we work primarily in Latin America, so in El Salvador, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, on issues at the intersection of human rights and migrants' rights. And then finally, there's a bucket of rights on peace and justice, where our work is primarily in Kashmir and Ethiopia. And it's so wonderful to have Anuradha in the audience, who's been such a phenomenal advisor and partner in some of our work to our students. She's a Kashmiri journalist. So those are sort of the buckets of rights. But in addition to sort of what we do in the clinic, much of what we teach in the clinic is how do you do it? So what are the values that underlie the work, and who leads the work? I think at Stanford, we're sort of in a bubble within a bubble within a bubble, and there are so many critiques of how actors in the global north engage in human rights work. So we teach students, we have classes on critiques of the human rights field, how do you engage in decolonial human rights advocacy. And then in terms of careers, I think we also really think hard about, okay, how do we support students into careers in this field? How do we think about summer internships and fellowships and, you know, other spaces in which students can continue to develop their learning? So that's sort of what I'll say about the clinic, but just wanted to say again, what a joy it was to just be able to listen to each of you today. And I really think it's like conversations like the one that you were all having with each other that motivates students to pursue human rights careers. So really, really thank you for being here and for doing all that you do.
I'll second everything that you said. We want this to be a useful event for you too, so if you do have any questions for any of the staff at the Human Rights Foundation about pursuing careers, any questions for Gulika, please do stay after the event and chat with us. On the back of your programs are also some more options for getting involved in human rights work, from sharing your takeaways from this event on social media, which we just spoke about, to interning with human rights activists through our Oslo Scholars Program. You can also consider coming to the Oslo Freedom Forum, which is our flagship conference that happens every year annually in Oslo, where you'll meet many more dissidents who are working on the front lines of social change. So with that, I'll invite you to please join us in the courtyard. We have lots of pizza, drinks. All of our speakers are here to talk with you, answer any of your questions, and thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Gulika.